Okay, so I'm going to start by making the leaves for the honeysuckle. So firstly I turn my board away from me. I'm going to be using some Crisco. So it's going to be using my paste, making a long sausage, and I'm placing that onto the greased board. A little bit of corn flour on the top. So just rolling this to the end of the board. And this is a way that I devised myself for making quicker leaves instead of making them one by one on the back of the board using the grooved board. So this way works a lot quicker. I'm putting corn flour into there so it doesn't stick, and then putting the rolling pin down in the middle and then rolling it up, creating a thick channel along the bottom, and that will be for where the wire goes. Putting the corn flour on here, and then I'm going to be using the bottom veiner on here, so I'm going to press that into the actual paste on here so that my thick ridge is along the bottom, and then I'm going to press that into there, just going around the outside of my leaf veiner, and then taking that off, and then that gives me a perfect impression of the leaf underneath. So always whenever you're going to be using your knife, take the residue crystals off, because sometimes they kind of drag through the paste. So now I've got an outline, so I can just use my knife, going a couple of millimeters on the inside on here, and you can alter the shape of your leaf if you want to. So I want it for a honeysuckle, so I'm going to be doing it a little bit more, a little bit pointed, and then I'll just show you how that's come out. And there's your leaf. Now if I wanted a smaller one, then I would just do a smaller one and just alternate it on here, and then so on all the way down there. Okay. So I'm going to be putting some corn flour on here, corn flour onto the veiner, take the excess off, and I'm going to be taking this off of here, folding it like that way, and then bringing it over onto my board. This I don't need now, so I'll put that out of the way, and then I'll bring this in front of me. I'm going to be taking a 28 gauge wire. Whenever you cut your wires, always cut them at an angle like that, so they're a lot sharper to then go into the paste. Putting my finger into the corn flour and putting that onto the top of here. Just going to dip this into the edible glue, and then just taking the excess off, and then putting my finger over the top here, and then just pricking into the bottom there, and then my finger's nice and flat, and I'm going to twist the wire so I can feel the wire going down underneath my finger, so it doesn't go into the board and it doesn't go up into my hand. Okay, so I only need to put this in just 1 centimetre there. That's fine. Bring it to the end of the board. I want to pinch and press, and what this does is encourages all the paste to go around the wire. Bringing this into the centre of the board, a little bit more cornstarch on top, and then what I like to do before I use my ball tool is I use my thumbs, and then start from the base of the wire and then going up to the top, from the base of the wire going up to the top like that. What this does is thins the paste out. You see, it's not waving at all. If I went straight on with the ball tool, it waves straight away. So with a flat finger like that, gives it a lot better gradient going down, nice and smooth. And then when it's nice and thin around the edge, then I can go half on with the ball tool, halfway on and halfway off. Okay, that's fine. So now I can put this onto my veiner, so putting it onto my hand, placing it onto the cornstarch veiner already, placing it in the middle, and then I'm going to put the top onto here, just make sure that's in the middle there, and then start to massage around the edge, not putting any pressure where the actual wire is here. Just press one last time, should be fine. Okay, and then I'm going to put this into a foil mould. The foil mould that's the same size as the leaf. Okay, and then put a central vein down the middle and scrunch it up a little bit, and then smooth it out so it's not sharp edges underneath. And then I can lift this off of here and then place that onto there, and then slightly bend the wire up, and then I can give this lots of movement there, and then leave it to dry, just like that. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to go and make one of the buds. So always knead your paste up to get it really nice and warm first of all. It saves you, when you're bringing the paste down onto the wire, it saves it cracking and all of that. So I'm just going to take just a small amount, just small, that's all. And then I'm going to put this onto a 28 gauge wire, so kneading the paste, and then with corn-floured fingers I tend to make a pizza like that, and then bring all of the edges around, giving me a nice smooth start of my bud. Putting the wire into the glue. You don't need to put a hook on these, it's absolutely fine. Inserting the wire into the centre, and then start to rolling my fingers, and then starting to pull the actual paste down onto the wire. So rolling and rolling, rolling, then taking the excess off of here, put lots of pressure onto there, and then twist the wire, and then take that excess off. Okay, so then smoothing the base, I can then put this onto here and smooth it like that, and then just starting to give this a little bit more detail, so it's a little bit more rounded at the end. And then I use a scriber, and then start from down here. So what I'm trying to do is imitate the actual petals before they're just starting to open. So the more indents I put in here, then obviously the bigger the bud would be. The smaller the bud, the less indents I would put on there. But then when I colour them, as you can see on here, all of the detail starts to shine out there as I go across with the colouring. But that's what I'll do later on. So now I can just give this a little bit of a bend, and then what I tend to do is then put these all into oasis in the formation of what they would be on the actual flower. So do smaller ones, but put them all into one group, so then I can see how the actual finished flower is going to look. So I've got a 28 gauge wire here, and I'm going to take these micro stamens, which are cream micro stamens, and you don't want to put them all at the same level, because otherwise it just looks a little bit, it's not so natural. So do a couple a little bit higher than the others, and then you want to just hold them all together. So I've got 6 here all together, but then I'm going to, probably be able to see it better here actually, would you? So then I'm going to actually pull one of these out, and that one's going to be my pistil, which is the central one. And then I'm going to use a pair of scissors and then just cut these from the base there, and I'm going to insert my wire into this high-tack glue that you can buy at any craft store. So the actual wire goes into there. These are paper covered wires, and they're Japanese wires, so I just put that about 1 centimetre at the bottom, and then put my fingers over there and just roll, roll, roll until I feel it's starting to get tacky, and then I'll just take my finger straight off and it's glued straight onto there. I would advise to do those maybe about an hour before, so they're very, very dry on there. And then what you can do before you actually make your flower, so I'll take the other one here that I've made before, is just take I've got a scriber here, and all you want to do is just kind of bend them like that. Just bending them up, and then that will give you the natural curvature when you actually go and insert that into the flower, which I'm going to be making now. So to make my flower, I'm going to be using exactly the same flower paste. I'm going to be using the Orchard products. It's a set of 3, these here, and I'm going to be using the largest one. So taking a little bit of Crisco, putting that onto my board, taking a small amount of paste, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a Mexican hat. So the Mexican hat procedure is because through here I need to make a point of paste, so to actually, so that's going to be for my throat. So really kneading the paste up, getting it nice and warm, and then a little bit of cornstarch on my fingers. I'm going to start to roll this up into, this is going to be for my throat, okay, but then you need to check that this actually fits through here, which it does, okay. So I've got a little indent there where, you know, when I just pushed it through, so the indent there, I'm going to then take my fingers and my thumbs and I'm going to start to pinch out from the bottom of the indent, giving me a Mexican hat, or a witch's hat. So getting this nice and thin at the base, making sure that that's nice and thin at the bottom there. Placing that onto my greased board, I'm going to then use a cell stick and then placing that on the bottom and then rolling out. Placing it on the bottom and then rolling out. Always keeping in mind that this part here is a lot longer, so it needs to be quite long out here. You may want to be doing these in various sizes, so the thickness of the paste here, you're going to be rolling this out later on, so the thickness of the paste here, if you get this quite thick, then you're going to end up with a very, very large flower. So I'll just do a medium-sized flower, and then I always put this into the cornstarch, and then bring that down on top of there, and then press right down now, and press really hard onto the board. Always take your paste from around the cutter first, never take the cutter off, because that stops it from furring and getting all furry around the edge. So that'll give you a nice clean cut. Okay, so now I can just release that from there, and then that's given me, looks like a little fork, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using a petal pad, foam petal pad, and I'm going to be putting my cornstarch just on here. Now sometimes this gets a little bit taller than this on here, so see how we go. I'm just going to remove that off of there, and then I'm going to place that through the middle and then straight down onto there. Sometimes it is a little bit, so sometimes I'll just flick it like that, that's fine, so so then I can just put this flat on here, or sometimes if they are very, very long, then you put it in between and then work on it like that. Mm-hmm. So some cornstarch onto the top, and then I'm going to start to use my cell stick. I'm going to start to roll these, and keep on rolling them. So obviously the more that you roll them, the larger your flower will be. Okay, so just rolling them like that, and then using the end of the cell stick, I want to then elongate the tail end of the flower, like that. And then I'm going to start to use a Dresden tool. So the thick part of the Dresden tool here, just putting it into the cornstarch as well, and I want to start to kind of be pulling it inwards, so cupping it inwards like that, and then just going round, cupping and then pulling inwards, so you're kind of smoothing the sides in and cupping in like that. Okay, I'm going to bring the whole of this off the pad now, and then I'm going to start to open up the throat, which means I'm going to be putting lots of cornstarch on the front of the cell stick, and then because this paste is very sticky, just going into there, a little bit more cornstarch, and then start to open up the throat like that, and then using the base of the cell stick, start to push from underneath, encouraging the paste to come around and starting to cup around, and then go backwards that way, and then open the throat up a little bit more. And then what I like to do is place this into one of the larger holes, and then actually give it a little bit of an indent on this side down here, and I'll be using a scriber for that. So just putting the scriber into there, and then just pressing straight down, and that gives it a little bit of an indent on that side. And then turn the flower over before you actually put the stamens in, and then using a smaller cell stick, I'll actually put that onto this side, and then just push back like that, and that encourages all of the flower to then curl backwards. You may want to use a knife and to just make sure that these are separate on there. Need to do that again on there. There we go. And now I'm going to insert the stamens that I've made before, and I'm going to put the wire into the actual cornflower. This helps it to go all the way through and without sticking. So you're twisting the wire, twisting, just going all the way through, and then nestle the wire right down into there with the stamens coming upwards, pointing upwards that way. Okay. So then what I want to do is I want to be starting to encouraging the paste to stick onto the paper wire, onto there, and then I can start to make the throat and bringing the throat down. I must always do this with cornfloured fingers, bringing it all the way down, making it nice and thin towards the end, all depending on what size flower you want to be making. And then at the end down here you can use a cell stick again and then curl the little, sorry, can you see there? Yep. Just curl the tail upwards like that. Just making sure that the stamens are correct there. And then what I do is then just put this into an oasis, sorry, the other way around, it's that way, isn't it? And putting this into an oasis, and then when it gets a little bit more leathery, then you can start to then pinching here, and then it starts to open the flower up, and then you can curl this end round, because some of them are very, very curled up and then some of them are quite the other way. That's how I'd make the flower, and then place that into my oasis to dry. Okay, so I'm going to start colouring the leaf for the honeysuckle, which is already dried, and I've taken the residue of the cornflower off of here, and I'm going to be mixing a foliage green and a primrose green, and whenever I colour with green I always add yellow into there to make it a much richer colour. So I can actually make 100 different type of greens by just putting a little bit more yellow in and a little bit more yellow in. Okay, so see the difference in those two, the two tones already. So I'm going to start with a lighter coloured green first of all. So I'm going to load up my brush, so that means to kind of have a mud wrestling competition with my brush. Load it like that to get all of the colours right down to the bottom of the bristles, and then start to, can you see I'm actually holding the wire here and then supporting the leaf underneath all the time. So just brushing this just all over, that's fine, and then exactly the same on the other side. Not bringing any detail up of any of the veins at the moment. So just colouring all onto there. And then now you can either go one of two ways. This is a quite large leaf, so I want it to be a little bit darker. If it was a smaller leaf, then I would add some more yellow into here, and then let me just show you that. Just make a very, very light yellow, and then load my brush up, and then using the back of the brush, just going over, and then it kind of gives like a two-tone on there, see from underneath. But this is a darker leaf, so I actually want to be putting some darker, like a darker tone onto there. So just going, using the back of the brush, using the contours of each of the veins, and just going round and round and round like that. Okay, the same on both sides. On a honeysuckle, you tend to find that it has a pink vein going down the centre on here. So what I've done is I've put some alcohol in here, pure alcohol, and I've dissolved some plum and some magenta. So whenever you go to paint, always blot onto here first of all, so you don't get too much. So just blot onto there, and then I'm just going to go down the central vein here, straight down, and then just bring this off, and then just fade upwards. So yes, it will become quite dark, but then as you'll see, as it dries, and it dries very, very quickly, it goes and then just fades away. Now, I don't want this to be just one central vein at the front, it has to be on the back as well. So to do that, I'm going to be mixing a bit of plum and a bit of deep magenta together, loading my brush up, so it goes right to the bottom of all of the bristles, really taking the excess off. and then I'm going to hold the actual leaf up, supporting at the back, and I'm going to use the back of my brush and just going from side to side, just going very gently, kind of rubbing over the back there, and then I just get like a little bit of a front and back. I also want to be putting the plum and pink magenta around the side, so just using the back of my brush, just going over, turn the leaf round, and then just catching, so I'm just rubbing from side to side, just going over, creating a really nice fine line. I also, now the front has dried, so I want to take the harshness away from there, so I'll just use the front of the brush, just using the front of the brush, and then just fading downwards, very gently, fading downwards, just taking that away. And then I want to be putting a little bit of detail on this side here, so using the front of my brush, rubbing like that, and then use the back of the brush, going over and then fading inwards. Okay, so the same over here, so you just use a little bit of the front of the brush, and then fading, going inwards. Now you have to do obviously the same here and here, can't have this just on the front detail, so just going over, and the same over there. So just using the back of the brush, so using the back of the brush like that brings up all of the veins on here. So you may choose to do a little bit more at the base down here, and then just using the back of the brush, slightly going out like that, so it's got more pink veins on the back. I'm going to use my green brush now, and then just go over, and then just take that harshness away, and it just helps. And then I'll be doing the glazing later on. So I'm going to start to colour the honeysuckle. I would advise when you are colouring very fine work like this, that you colour it within half an hour really, so it's still got a little bit of give in there. Can you see it's still a little bit leathery, this one? And because otherwise they tend to ping off and break, and it's there's nothing more upsetting than going through all this, you know. So I'm going to be loading up my brush with a very light pastel yellow, and I'm going to be putting the colour down into the throat and then rubbing. Also as well, there is a benefit for colouring flowers if they are still very leathery. They actually absorb the colour better, and you'll get a much more deeper colour, so you don't have to be rubbing so hard onto there. Okay, so just putting your fingers underneath here. It is starting to dry, so you do need to support. So just going underneath, putting the yellow onto all of the front of the flower, and then putting the yellow underneath the throat, so when you're colouring, it's a build-up of colour. So I wouldn't necessarily just stop here because I want pink all down here. I'm going to colour all of this with yellow, and then when I start to put some of the salmon colours on later on, and the pinks, and developing the colour, and then start to go on with the darker colours with the plum, it's a build-up of colour, and it makes it a lot more intense. There we go. Okay, so I've coloured that, all of that yellow. So as I said, I'm going to be trying to just use one brush throughout the whole process. So I'm going to take the bud that I made before as well, and I'm going to be rubbing this with the yellow. And then obviously if I had 7 or 8 more flowers and lots more buds, I would do all of those in this one process, doing them all with the yellows, putting them back into my oasis, and then start to mix the next colour down. So I put it in my colours are in order of the way that I'm actually going to be putting them onto the flower. So now I'm going to be using some of this yellow, and I'm going to be bringing a little bit of peach down, and then mixing that up. Now if that becomes a little bit too harsh, the peach on there, you may bring some of the white down into there, and then just mix. I never ever just take a colour straight out of a pot and then put it straight onto my flower. I always mix. Whenever you're mixing colours, you would always mix the colour and then look away, and then look back, and those 3 seconds that you look back, that's the actual the colour that you've been mixing. If you're just mixing the colour and your eyes become accustomed to the colour and then you put it onto there, and then you glaze it, and then come back and you might be quite horrified. So I've made a salmon colour, but I want it a little bit more of a salmon colour, so I'm going to put some of the pink in here, making it a little bit more tropical colour. Okay, this is what I use for my hibiscus. So now I'm going to load my brush up. So all the yellow that I had on my brush before is now turned into this colour. Okay, so we'll go to the bud first, and then just going over just onto the top. I want to keep the base of my bud yellow, so just using the front of the brush to colour it all with the salmon, and then start to use the back of the brush. That will get more colour on there, and then just fading it down, coming down, so I've still got a yellow base onto there. So loading my brush up onto here, I'm going to be just using the front of the brush like that to get the colour on, and then use the back of the brush and then fade, just fading like that. So you have lots of colour on there first of all, and then the residue, you can take the residue off, but you can just then fade upwards onto there. So I would like to put a little bit of darker colour on the base underneath here. So my fingers underneath just supporting, and then fading upwards. And I'd like to also do that on the back underneath here. So just putting a little bit of colour on there, using the back of the brush, and also I'd like to put a little bit on the front on here as well. So just putting my finger underneath, supporting, just going onto there, and I'm going to be just going around the edges as well, using the back of my brush just on the side there. Okay, so now I want to put a little bit of drama on here, because I'm all about the drama. So I'm going to be bringing a bit of the plum down, and I'm going to be loading my brush up. Always load your brush up. And then I'm going to start from the base here, so supporting the flower here. So just using the front of the brush, going round first, twisting it, the wire in my hand, just getting lots and lots of plum on there, and then using the back of the brush. Can you see that line there? So you can actually incorporate lines onto there if you want to, or you could just fade it up there, and just fading. Okay, so now I'm going to be supporting the back of the flower here. So this is what I was saying to you before. I'm going to be using the front of the brush there to get the colour on, and then just taking the residue off. Now I'm going to then fade that, but then I'm going to be using the back of the brush, and actually going to be bringing up the detail on the back over there. Can you see that line down the centre, and then just using the back of the brush there. I can do a little bit of that on the front as well, so using just the back of the brush to go down the sides on here. I can go all the way around the edge on here, bringing that detail up, making sure that the dust just falls down, and then just highlighting just on the edges on here, just using the back of the brush, use the front of the brush there to get the colour on, and then the back of the brush to then fade. So using the front of the brush like that to get the colour on, rubbing, and then using the back of the brush to then just fade away like that. Exactly the same on the back as well. So using the front of the brush to get the colour on. There we go. And then taking the residue off, and then just going over, and then just fading, going down. Now I'd also like to give the stamens a little bit of interest on here as well, and the pistil. So I'm going to be, I've made a colour up here. Yes, it looks quite virulent. It's like a vine green, and I've put a little bit of yellow in there. But when you, it's just on the tips. I'm going to hold this upside down so the colour doesn't travel down the actual pistils and stamens. So I'm just going to be putting up just a little bit, just onto the top there, just onto each one. So it just adds just a little bit of colour just onto there, onto each one. And then it dries instantly on there because that's made with the alcohol. So I'll just place that back into there, and then I'm going to be just putting a little bit more colour onto here, and then this is how you'll see all of the details starting to come up when I went through with the scriber. So I'm going to be using the plum. You can even hold this down onto a piece of paper towel if you want to, and then just go over from side to side. Just from side to side, getting lots and lots of colour on the front and then fading downwards. Okay, but because you're using the back of the brush, can you see that you'll actually see the yellow through there? So it's not just one block colour. So I'm just fading downwards. And now I'm going to be using a little bit of this other colour, which is an aubergine. So I'm going to be loading up my brush and then starting from the front and then fading downwards. Getting that dark colour on there. Using the back of the brush, you can even rub it onto there to get really, really dark colour, and then just fading downwards. And then you've got like a, so you've got your yellow, and then you've got your salmon, then you've got your pink, and then you've got your aubergine on the end there, and it looks a lot more natural. So the next stage is for me to glaze all of these. Okay, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be setting the colour in my flowers and my leaves, and to do that I always do a wet glaze. So in here I've got isopropyl alcohol, and I've got a full amount of isopropyl alcohol, and I've got a quarter amount of confectioner's glaze. So what that does is set all of the colour on there, and then it's not a dusty appearance and it won't come off if you've got a white cake. So whenever you're colouring flowers, you must always think that these colours will go a little bit darker with the wet glaze on there, so just keep that in mind. Now with the glaze, I've got 3 or 4 containers of these at home, and when I dip the actual products into there, some of the residue of the dust will come off, so you're never going to lose the pigment of the green or the yellow or the whatever. So that is what I have at home, you know. So I've got one for greens, one for reds. Okay, so we'll start off by I've just got this one for here for today, so I'm just going to be using the lighter coloured ones first. So just taking a spoon and just dipping, giving this a wash with the glaze on there. Can you see it just makes it look so much more natural, and all the colours all blend in. So just letting the excess just drip off onto here, and then you want to put it into any container, preferably a cardboard box that you can just throw away, and then you want to spin on here. So can you actually see on the edge there some of the residue is coming off? So you need to make sure that you spin enough that then it becomes dry, because if you don't do that, you just do a little bit and then put it into your oasis, sometimes you get drip marks coming down. So then that's completely glazed on there, and then just place it back into your oasis to dry. Exactly the same for the flower. So using the glaze, go straight over, being careful not to touch it, going down on the inside. I do this with all of my flowers and all of my leaves. And I do my avalanche rose. I have the full avalanche rose, and it's a little bit of a scary moment when you're putting the glaze over there, but you need to make sure that you go down in between each of all of the layers, because if you don't, then it will become very, very apparent later on that that you've missed a little bit. So keep on going until you don't see any residue of any of the glaze from there, and then that's completely done then. Okay, so I'll place that back into here to completely dry. I'm just taking my leaf. So obviously I would be doing this in a different glaze bath, but it just sets the colours on here beautifully, and then it brings them to life. So just letting the excess just drip off there, then placing that into here, and then spinning, taking the excess off. There we go. So the next stage is going to be the assembly, putting everything together. I'm going to start to assemble all of the buds and the leaves. As you can see on here, I've already incorporated some of the flowers onto there. Just want to give you a quick demonstration on how to make start the beginnings of the stem on here. Now whenever I start to tape any of my flowers up, I'll always pull the actual tape to release the glue in there, and then start to rub this onto my hands to get my fingers slightly tacky. Okay, don't worry, this bit's going in the bin. So then taking a piece of tape, and however thick you want your tape to be. You can use a tape shredder. This can go into 4 if you want it to. I'm just going to be placing that into that, and this one's just going to cut this into 2. Okay, so I'm going to start by using a 20 gauge wire. So just pull this to release the glue. I'm going to start by a thinner wire towards the end, and I'm just going to put my finger over there and then start to twist the tape going towards the top. So I'm going to start to use my smaller leaves. Now whenever I attach my leaves, I tend to leave a little bit of a gap there and then just roll round once, place the next leaf on as well, about ½ centimetre there, just go round once, okay, and then with these 2 wires, then I then pull these down to meet the rest. So then you just get a real, there's no wire showing there at all, okay, so that's how you do that. But what I want to do is I would like to incorporate some buds onto the end of here, so I'm going to take just two small buds and then just holding one there, and then I'm going to put another one there. Okay, you can do exactly the same with the buds as well. You can go round and then you can actually pull those wires down. So the wire for the buds is a white wire, so you can then see which ones they are, and then just pull those down and then pull them down. Now if you're doing very, very fine work, you could take a pair of scissors and then just take these little bits off of here, but sometimes you know, like it depends on what type of flower you're doing and how thin the stem is, but for a honeysuckle it's quite a thick stem, so that's absolutely fine. So always bend the wire as you go, so slightly giving that a little bit of a bend, and now I'm going to be placing 2 more leaves onto here, so just either side on there, just rolling round and then pulling the wires down, making sure that there's no wires visible at all. And I'm going to put a couple more buds in here. Sometimes you could use a fine pair of a pair of pliers to actually get some of these wires, and then just pull them out and then just make sure that they're really pulled right down. So be moving this as well, always having in mind where this is going to actually fit into your arrangement, and then start to come down. Now in between each set of leaves, then you want, so that's my first set of leaves here. So I'm going to actually leave the wire a little bit longer now. So you wouldn't just necessarily put them, you know, the same space in between each one. If you can do, if you're lucky enough and the season is right and the honeysuckle is out, then go out into the garden and get a fresh sprig of honeysuckle, and then you can imitate it from there on. Otherwise, go onto Google Images and then just put in honeysuckle leaves, and if you know the variety, and then you can see how the actual the plant is formed. So just coming down a little bit more. Now I'm actually going to put in a 18 gauge wire now, because this is starting to get a little heavy. Okay, so I'm going to place an 18 gauge wire just behind here where my next set of leaves is going to come out. So that's how I disguise it. So just attaching that onto there first of all, and then just coming down, so really attaching that, and then actually coming down with the tape, going back up with the tape. So what this is doing is actually making the 18 gauge wire a little thicker as well, giving the impression. I'm just going to go back over here just a little bit and then down, so it's a natural progression and natural thickness, just going up. So just here, that's actually where I've attached my wire. I'm then going to put in my 2 final leaves. Now the bigger the leaf or the bigger the petal, I would advise that you actually put a little bit of this thinner tape, just a little bit, just about 1.5 cm of the tape, just coating the wire, and then attach it onto the main stem with the floristry tape, and it saves it from it makes it a lot more stable and stops it from moving around. So now I'm going to use like a full width tape, and I'm just going to start from there, going over with the tape. I'm going to just take off the base down here, and then I'm going to bend that little bit up onto here, and that's going to give me the stability to actually put this into my arrangement as well. Just using the pliers to just flatten the bottom bit there, and then going over with my tape, just going over, because what I'm using in the base of my arrangement is what is called a Kenzen, which they use in Ikebana flower arranging, and Ikebana is the ancient form of Japanese flower artistry, and they have these things like it's called a Kenzen. It's like a bed of nails, which is fantastic for arranging sugar flowers, but you do need to have it a little bit thicker, the wire at the base. So I'll bring this over now and show you what I mean by a Kenzen. So in the base on here, that's the Kenzen there. So then I can just press this into here. So looking from the front of my arrangement, just going to see how I'm going to put this together. I just want that coming out of the back over here, so the eye is drawn from the front and then just going through the arrangement through the back. So as you can see on here, what I have done with the flowers is I've attached these onto a 20 gauge wire, put all of my smaller buds on there first, and then started to incorporate some of the honeysuckle flowers, and then attach that to my main stem. So I'll just place this out of the back there. Yeah, I just need to put a little bit more tape on the bottom on here, so it's a little thicker. And then they just don't fall over then, and there's no breakages at all. You could put them into some Stay Soft clay if you wanted to, or obviously tape them all together and then place them onto a cake, or just have them coming out of the side of a vase. So I've just made that a little bit thicker on the base there, and then that can go into my Kenzen. Very, very secure in there, it's not going to move at all now. And then I'll place that into there, so then when you do take the photograph, you take it from that angle there, so you don't actually see the Kenzen in there. It looks quite natural. That's my honeysuckle.